Hello, everyone, and welcome to this video author interview. Today we have Ed Freitas, who is a developer and author and has worked on many Succinctly books with Syncfusion over the years, including Azure Functions, Angular Dart, Razor Component Succinctly, and many, many others. But today we are going to talk about his most recent release, which will be the Uno Platform Succinctly. So, hey, Ed, how's it going?
Oh, thank you. Very well. And thanks for having me here today.
Oh yeah, thanks for joining us. So before we kind of get into it, would you mind giving a quick kind of overview of what the Uno Platform Succinctly book will cover?
Yeah, so basically, Uno Platform is, I would say, a long time dream of many developers because it's one of those long ideas where you could sort of write one code base and being able to compile that to many different platforms. And that's been like a long dream for many developers. I think the first time I heard of that was probably 20 years ago with Borland Kylix. It was basically a Delphi clone, but running on Linux. So you would be able to natively compile Delphi applications in Linux and then be able to deploy those applications to not only Linux, but other systems that were going around back in those days, besides Windows. So that was the first time I've heard of something like that. So fast forward 20 years, or a bit more, 25 years, something like that. And, we have Uno, they have a really good platform and tool to be able to accomplish that. So, yeah, it's in an easy way, in a nutshell, it's C#, XAML, put that together and target multiple platforms, and you have an app that pretty much runs everywhere. And that's the whole idea behind Uno. I think it's a brilliant idea. And, for me as a developer, it's been a long time sort of dream come true. And that's why I embraced it and decided to write a book about it.
Excellent. Well, I'll say if this was my first time hearing about it, you definitely would have already sold me on it and gotten me interested. But for you, what would you say was the first moment that you found yourself interested in the Uno platform?
There's been a lot of talk about, hybrid applications. So say, for example, that you develop an application that runs for the web. So let's take React, right, from Facebook. So you write a React application, and then you have a sort of 95% compatible framework, which is React Native, which is also obviously based on React, therefore the name. So you take that code and then you change a few things here and there, and now you're basically targeting, mobile devices all of a sudden. So Android and iOS, which are the two major platforms. But that code is still JavaScript. It's still, HTML, and it's tied together by that framework, which is called React. So there's been a few of these, and they are still around. Flutter is another one from Google. Other independent vendors have their own versions of similar things. Ionic framework is another one. But if you look at them, they sort of been constrained to mostly mobile and web. To some extent, they're expanding a little bit to web and mobile, and they do a great job. I mean, I'm a big fan of Flutter myself. But Uno is different because it takes on the whole philosophy of coming from the other side. So it's coming from Windows onto these other systems. Whereas these other tools like React and Flutter, they've started off from the mobile world, and they're expanding from that world to the web and potentially some other platforms. However, Uno is taking the community of Windows developers and bringing those developers to be able to write applications in what they already know, which is C# and XAML, to a broader range of systems and platforms, which includes the web and includes mobile and other things like smart TVs and more.
What would you say, just for comparison for maybe new users, what were some of the hardest challenges that you faced when first implementing Uno?
For me, it was the fact that I'm not super strong with XAML. The C# part was straightforward because I've been using C# since it came out. So that was quite easy. But the XAML part was although I know that there are a lot of people out there that love XAML. For me, it was the hardest part.
Cool. And just for reference of like for any other people who might also be struggling in that same field, like what would you say are some tips that you would recommend for people who are trying to get into Uno and maybe are struggling more on that side?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing I can suggest is it's really easy to get into it, right? And especially if you come from, let's say, a Windows Forms background, then you're going to have some kind of shock, and because it's a totally different way of writing the UI. So I would suggest in that case to start with UWP applications, start with WPF applications first, and then once you have the hang of it, then go to Uno.
Right, excellent. And I think those are seriously some excellent tips and tricks. And actually, kind of speaking on that, I know they'll learn a lot of stuff from the Uno Platform Succinctly ebook. So I guess just kind of as a preview to some who might be interested in it, what would you say are like 3 key pieces of info that developers might take away from this book?
The first is that it's not as intimidating as it seems. If you do come from a C# and XAML background, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you feel right at home. If you don't have that background, then it might be a bit more tricky. Second takeaway is that it is actually maybe the most cross compatible platform in terms of where you can deploy your application to with the same code base that I've seen. You do have a shared project between the other projects, and then you have per platform a different project. So WPF, you have a project for that. UWP, you have a project for that. Android, you have a project for that. And you almost just need to compile that project to be able to target that application for that platform. I mean, in the book, I focus specifically on WebAssembly. And it's basically a Windows application that you end up running in WebAssembly as a web application. And the third one is that in this book, what I decided to do was to sort of look what was out there in GitHub and in the market. So look at the existing demos, look at the existing examples that were already out there, and build upon that. So try to improve that those examples, some of them, and provide a bit more context of how those examples work. So the reason I chose to do that was that this is already a big change in terms of thinking of how you write an application. So I thought, well, if I'm going to build an application from scratch and this is already targeting, multi-platform, it's probably going to be very confusing for just 100 pages. So that's why I decided to look what was around and already existing and code base that was already there, and take that code base, make some changes and improve that, and sort of guide the reader on how to work with what's already out there. So I think these are the 3 main takeaways from the book.
All right, awesome. And also, while we're talking about the book, if any of those 3 points interest you, I wanted to send a quick reminder in the video that we will have a link to the book down in the video description, and we'll also have a card popping up here on your on the YouTube channel that you can click on, and it'll take you straight over there. But as we were talking about the book, I guess let's kind of go ahead and talk about kind of your experience in writing the Uno Platform Succinctly ebook. Did you yourself find that you learned anything?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's I find that with every book, not just this one. So it's a common theme for me. It's very challenging to write a book because especially if you're a developer, because as when you're writing an example application, you tend to try to always do what's best for you as a developer, right? So what feels more comfortable, what's the easiest path, to sort of look at your own code and say, well, I want to refactor this code this way, or I want to write this class this way. Whereas when you write a book, you have to think of who's reading it, right? So I have to sort of adapt my style to the person that is going to be on the other side, that's going to be looking at that book and trying to make sense of it. Another thing that I learned, you have to take, like for example, Uno was challenging because it's a platform that targets many different systems, right? So it can target Windows, and in Windows it can target like 3 types of applications. Then you have, it can target Android, iOS, even smart TVs and WebAssembly. So, I mean, you end up like with 6 or 7 different targets that are just there out of the box. And then you ask yourself like, okay, what do I do with all this stuff, right? So trying to put all that information, or as much as possible, into an easy to digest format is quite challenging, because it's not just focusing on one particular platform. You have to sort of talk a little bit about each of them. That's definitely was very challenging, and of course that helped me to learn quite a few workarounds and a few tricks to get it done in 100 pages. So yeah, that was quite interesting.
Nice. And actually, I can fully relate to you on the point of like, you almost learn more by trying to figure out how you're going to teach the topic, because kind of like you said, like I know for me, I do video editing, and like I feel like I've had to do teachings and stuff like that for different platforms on there. And I find that like when I'm editing, like everything's like, it's just second nature, muscle memory. You're just kind of doing it and you're like, yeah, this makes sense because I know how I do it. But I feel like the times that I've had to like walk people through, I'm like, oh, I don't have a super concise way to explain it until I start thinking about how I'm going to explain it to them. And then somehow it almost makes more sense to me. So I kind of get you. It's like when you're teaching and you're explaining, you end up explaining partially to yourself as well. It's kind of a mutual teaching experience.
Yeah, definitely. You've gone beyond your comfort zone to sort of touch a topic that otherwise would be familiar to you, but you're by going out of that comfort zone and placing yourself in the shoes of others, you're basically serving or acting as 2 roles. You're the developer and you're also the instructor, but you're also the student at the same time. So it's an interesting mix.
Yeah, it's a multi-layer aspect. Yeah, keeps
Yes.
going. But well, nice. And I guess also from your experience, I know you kind of mentioned earlier into this interview, kind of talking about the future of Uno and seeing how that would go. Like for you personally, where do you see the next couple of years for Uno?
They're probably the first one to really nail it down in terms of how many platforms they can reach with one code base. So from a technical point of view, I think they have it pretty much nailed it down. It's very, very compelling what they have. I know, I'm pretty sure that with the C# development community, it's going to be a no-brainer. Other communities, it will probably require more investment in developer relationships and promoting the platform. So that's going to require some muscle. It's just how fast can you critically build a huge mass of developers around it that are not just coming from the C# and Windows worlds. So you want to get all these other developers involved. You want to get Flutter developers, you want to get JavaScript developers, React developers, all these other communities, Python developers, and that's going to take some work, but no doubt about it that they're going to stick around and it's going to grow.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. I can't see how they wouldn't at this point. Nice. Well, I know kind of keeping up with some of this stuff can be difficult for developers. I mean, it's definitely a very intensive job. But for you, like keeping up with trends, like do you have any sources that you follow or anything that you do to keep up with everything?
Yeah, well, I tend to look a lot at Hacker News. I mean, it's it's one of these websites where you find all sorts of stuff, but most of the stuff that is there is actually quite relevant to developers. I check out some Microsoft blogs. Syncfusion blog is a great source as well. There's really great tips. There are always great tips there.
Links
Um,
below.
yeah.
And I mean, kind of talking about the book and other resources that you might have, do you have like a blog page or a website or anything that people could find you at?
Yeah, so it's very simple. So my first name, so Ed, and then my surname, Freitas, me. And there's, there you can find sort of a list of books I have, some courses I've produced, and there's also a link to my blog. I mean, I'm not a frequent blogger, so don't expect to see a blog every week. It's more like every 2 months. But yeah, I mean, there's some nice resources there, especially the Succinctly books. You can uh, click on the links, and that will take you to the Syncfusion website where you can download the books, and some other courses that I produce as well for Pluralsight. And yeah, that's essentially what you can find there.
So before we finish, I just want to check, do you have any other closing statements or anything else you would like to add?
Well, yeah, I think again that the guys from the Uno platform are really onto something. I think they've done a magnificent job with what they've done. I would also recommend to everybody watching this video to really look at the Syncfusion website and look at the Succinctly books. I mean, there's a ton of information there it's beautiful what Syncfusion has managed to produce with all the authors part of this community. So you can basically get quite acquainted with technology. And if you want to pick some of the books there, start learning. They're easy to digest, and you'll get up and running quite fast. And beyond that, just be curious, push yourself. It's not an easy road. It's not been an easy road for me. I never thought, I would be writing books, and here I am. uh, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, do you think you would be able to write a book? I probably said no. You just have to believe in yourself and push forward and always learn and keep learning and be curious about it.
Nice. I think that's great. And also to that same point, not only is he writing books, if you go to our Succinctly series page and you type in his name, you will actually have to scroll to see all the books that he's written. So but seriously, thank you, Ed, for joining us. We really appreciate all the work that you've done with us, and we're glad that we get to have you for this other Succinctly series book.
No, thank you very much, and I'm really excited about the book. I'm really excited about the series in general, and thank you so much for inviting me for today's call.
Well, thank you for joining us. And also for all of you viewers, thank you for joining us as well. As we had mentioned, all of the links and everything will be included in the description below. So if you want to check out any of those, you should go to scroll down and find everything that we've mentioned before. Also, if you have any questions for either Syncfusion or Ed, please leave them in the comment section below. And also, if you'd like to see more series like this, please let us know. We are happy to bring them to you. But until the next one, we hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
All right, bye, everyone.